Welcome back once again to this channel. What is sonnet? What are the sonnet sequences? And when did the term sonnet become quite popular? Who are the main practitioners of the sonnet? And how many type of sequences are there in English literature? If such type of questions are arising in your mind, then I tell you, you are at the right place to get satisfied with all your curiosity. So let's begin from the very beginning of the sonnet. Simply, the term sonnet takes us to the Italian term sonetto, which means little sound or song. So simply one question that may arise in your mind, that sonnet is nothing but a certain kind of song or a certain kind of sound, and they are not a big one, rather little sound or little song. Whenever you are in your graduation course or even in your higher secondary course, I am quite confident that you must have come across the name sonnet, and there you have learned that sonnets are written in 14 lines. And before entering into the main motto of the sonnets, we need to learn another word, that is troubadour. Troubadour, Troubadour. It simply means that to achieve someone, you need to praise someone. For example, if you are writing your poems in praise of your beloved, so what will happen, that this beloved will come to you, and the love affair will be fulfilled. There will be a certain kind of venture that you are just praising your beloved, and as a result, the beloved is reciprocating. So initially, the sonnets were written only to achieve the beloved. Now, the another thing that I think that you are now thinking, that what is the very beginning point of the sonnet, and to understand the answer of this question, we must have to go to Italy. And there was a famous person. The name of the person is Giacomo di Lentini. Just remember the name, Giacomo di Lentini, who is given the credit of writing sonnet first. But unfortunately, that person was unable to popularize the term sonnet. Later, it is Petrarch who popularized the term by practicing this term and by writing his sonnet sequence, which are addressed to his beloved Laura. And from then on, the sonnet became quite popular. Gradually, this term became so much popular that we can have sonnets in French, in Danish, in Scott, even in American language, or you all know that even in English language, in English literature, there is also sonnet. So far we have come to know that the sonnet is not at all has its origin in English literature, rather it has its origin in Italian literature. Even in Italy, we find Dante Alighieri, who also wrote a sonnet sequence, and the name of the sonnet sequence is La Vita Nova. It is written for his beloved Beatrice. Petrarch wrote Canzoniere. Just remember the name Canzoniere. It has 227, that means the 227 sonnets, and among whom 89 sonnets are written for Laura whenever she was in dead. I am just telling you that the entire sonnet sequence, 227 are addressed to Laura, but especially there is a segment, there is a division that 89 sonnets are addressed to Laura whenever she was in her deathbed, whenever she was fighting with the death. Then Petrarch wrote 89 sonnets, giving his heart, giving his untold emotions to Laura. And later, the sonnet form came into England. So, who brought this sonnet form into England? This is the question, and try to let's have the answer of this question. It is Sir Thomas Yat and Henry Howard. The two name again I am repeating. It is Sir Thomas Yat and Henry Howard who first introduced the sonnet into English literature. Later, their poems, especially the poems of Sir Thomas Yat, were published in a Tortell's Miscellany. So, the book where the sonnets were published was Tortell's Miscellany. So, whenever this sonnet form came into England, gradually we find the havoc spread, the rapid spread of the sonnet among the many writers. And many writers easily grasp the term, grasp the entire form to express their untold heart for their beloved. So now let's have a quick look into those writers who wrote in English about their untold story, about their love affair. First, we must have to tell the name Sir Philip Sidney, who wrote Astrophil and Stella, and this book was published in 1591. In this book, we find that there are 108 sonnet and 11 songs. And fortunately, this book is called the first English sonnet. In this book, we find that Sir Philip Sidney is addressing his beloved, that is Penelope Devereux, and he is just comparing his beloved Esther, and Sir Philip Sidney himself represents himself as astrophil or stargazer. That means that he is continuously looking at the star, so therefore he seems to us a stargazer. Now, another practitioner of English sonnet is Edmund Spenser. This name must be mentioned here because he was very much gigantic in English literature in uh, writing sonnet sequences or in writing many other poems too. Fairy Queen, we also know that it is a poem written by Edmund Spenser. So, Amoreti. Amoreti is the sonnet sequence which Edmund Spenser wrote, and this book was published in 1594. In this sonnet sequence or in this book, we find 88 sonnets and an epithalamion addressed to his wife Elizabeth Boyle. So, the thing we need to remember here is that epithalamion is a certain kind of poem where the celebration is done on the occasion of the wedding or on the occasion of the nuptial ceremonies. So, in this sonnet sequence, we find that the love between the sonneteer Edmund Spenser and Elizabeth Boyle are not unfelt, rather their love affair got consummated, and that's why Edmund Spenser wrote an epithalamion. There is also another sonneteer whose name is Samuel Daniel. Just remember the name because in entrance exam the question comes there about the sonnet sequences. It is Samuel Daniel who wrote Delia, and this book was published in 1592. In this sonnet sequence, there are 50 sonnets. Later, we have in our hand Michael Dreyton, whose ideas mirror was quite remarkable. And in this sonnet sequence, we have 64 sonnets, and all the sonnets are addressed to Phoebe. Later, this work, that means the ideas mirror was revised and reworked, and this book was again published in 1619, and there we find 73 sonnets. Falk Greville wrote another sonnet sequence, that is Calica, and it has 109 sonnets. This sonnet sequence was published in 1633. And remember that the same year, in 1633, John Donne also published Songs and Sonnets. This is also an anthology. Just remember the name, and John Donne, you all know that, is quite remarkable as a metaphysical poet. Now come to the star practitioner of the sonnet sequence. It is Shakespeare who wrote his sonnets, and these sonnets were published in 1609. There we find 154 sonnets, and interestingly, 126 sonnets are addressed to a boyfriend. Though there is the dispute who is the character in these sonnets, some suggest that it is WH. So WH means that maybe Henry Wroth or maybe other, we don't know, but there is still now the dispute among the critics of Shakespeare. So therefore we can never certainly say what is the actual identity of the characters whom William Shakespeare is addressing his sonnets, and the remaining 26 sonnets are addressed to a black lady. Similarly, just like the boyfriend, we don't know the actual identity of the black lady. So we can say that Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets, and in almost all his sonnets, we find that he is taking the help of some of the similes, some of the metaphors, to unearth his untold emotion, untold passion. In Shakespeare's sonnets, we find a deviation from the other Petrarchal sonnets. Earlier in Petrarchal sonnets, we find that there was two division. One was octave, and another one was sestet. You all know that sonnet is nothing but a solution giving poems. In octave there is the proposition, there is the problem, and in sestet we find the conclusion, we find the solution. But Shakespeare, by his genius, by his poetic capability, transformed some of the uh, forms in sonnet. He gave his sonnets three quatrain and one couplet. That means that he actually made a division of his sonnets into four stanza. There we find three quatrain. Quatrain means four line stanza. So there we find three quatrain and a couplet. That means that two lines which Shakespeare uses most often to draw a conclusion. But in case of Petrarchal sonnet, we find at the very end part or very last portion of the octave there is the volta, and in sestet we find the uh, solution of problem. Now come to another writer, Lady Mary Wroth, who wrote Pamphylia to Amphilenthus. And this sonnet sequence, we have 83 sonnet sequence. So far we have mentioned the name. They were actually popular either in the 16th century or in the 17th century. And from then on, we find that the sonnets were gradually dousing down its own popularity, because there appeared many other genre. There appeared dramatic literature. So therefore the sonnets were not at all basking its own popularity in the then time. But later, in the 19th or early part of the 20th century, again this form revived itself and it began to release its own popularity, its lost popularity. In 19th and 20th century, we find Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who wrote sonnets from the Portuguese, and this sonnet sequence was published in 1850. Here in this sonnet sequence, we find 44 sonnets, and all the sonnet sequences are addressed to his lover, Robert Browning. We all know that they were from Victorian period. Robert Browning is in fact uh, is often told as the master of dramatic monologue. And we find also in the same period, in the Victorian period, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and the sonnet sequence name is The House of Life. This sonnet sequence was published in 1870 and it has 101 sonnets. George Meredith is also another 20th century sonneteer who wrote Modern Life, and this book contains 50 sonnets. But interestingly, here we find that all the sonnets are not written in 14 lines. Rather, we find that all the sonnets are written in 16 lines. So, this is the beginning of a certain kind of experiment with the form of the sonnet. Later, we will find in the hand of the Hopkins Cartel sonnet is also there, and I will make another video of the form of the sonnets, and there I will discuss the Petrarch sonnet, the Shakespearean sonnet, the Cartel sonnet, the extended sonnet. All the sonnet form will be there in the video. So that type of sonnets will be discussed in the another segment of the video. So today for now I am just ending this video with a request to all of you. If you like the sonnet sequence, please subscribe and share this video with your friends and in groups. Thank you.